I topped off the coffee and nudged the sugar bowl toward my son and his wife, Derek and Lena, across the dining table. Sunday light slanted through the windows at 2851 Alder Lane, painting everything in quiet stripes that made our plates look like they were behind window blinds. Lunch dishes crowded the placemats: roast chicken, pan gravy flecked with pepper, a bowl of green beans glossed with butter and lemon. The house smelled like thyme and warm bread. For once, I felt light, even hopeful, a rare thing lately, but the calendar was about to turn in my favor. I wanted you to hear it from me, I said, easing back into my chair and letting the wood settle under my weight. I'm retiring next month. Pension will be $2,400 a month. Not a fortune, but enough. I plan to finally sleep without an alarm clock that sounds like a factory whistle. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us what time it is where you are right now. Derek glanced at Lena. It wasn't a long look, maybe half a second, but something quick and private flickered between them, the way a pilot light flickers before a burner whooshes on. My coffee turned bitter on my tongue. Lena set her fork down with deliberate care, aligning the tines so they pointed exactly at 12 o'clock. That's perfect timing, she said. Her voice had the calm, padded tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. We've been meaning to discuss your rent. Starting April, you'll pay $200 monthly. The syllables hung in the air like smoke from a blown-out candle, spreading while we all watched. I looked at my son, waiting for him to grin and tell me this was a bad joke, a prank he and his wife had cooked up that would end with "Gotcha, Dad." He stared at his plate and chased a crumb with his thumb, the universal gesture of a man who needs something to do with his hands while his courage accumulates elsewhere. Rent? I kept my voice level. Derek, I'm family. This is our house. You live here, Calvin, Lena answered, slow and patient, like she was explaining an invoice. She never called me Dad. She'd settled on my first name years ago, the way people label a storage box and then forget what's inside. You pay rent. That's how the world works. She slid a crisp printout across the table, a spreadsheet, columns, totals, planned. It smelled faintly of toner and the resolute scent of a decision made without the target in the room. Derek finally spoke, without raising his eyes. Dad, try to understand. We have expenses, mortgage, utilities. It's fair that you contribute. I scanned the sheet. Bedroom rental, utilities allocation, shared space usage, food, itemized like a bistro menu. $1,200. Perfectly. Half of what I'd earned over 43 years, bent over blueprints and steel, reduced to exact cents and aligned in neat, right-justified columns. There was even a line for cleaning supplies, as if the molecules of lemon oil knew who had paid for the wood they soaked into. When you mentioned the pension, Lena continued, smoothing the page with the back of her hand, we realized you could afford market rate for your room, utilities, shared spaces, food. $1,200 is generous for this neighborhood. I stood. The chair legs whispered across the hardwood. I'd helped Derek refinish 5 years ago. My palms remembered that weekend. The chalky feel of dust, the hum of the orbital sander, Derek laughing at some podcast while I changed discs, the way the boards looked when the first coat of polyurethane turned them from tired to honey. No slamming, no theatrics. I just looked at them. My son cataloguing crumbs, his wife wearing the tight smile of someone who'd closed a sale and didn't want to gloat. Interesting, I said. It came out flat, almost curious. Very interesting indeed. I took the stairs slowly, one fingertip gliding along the banister I'd planed by hand to solve a barely noticeable warp. Lena called after me, "First payment due April 1st? That's 3 weeks." She sounded like a front desk clerk reciting check-in time to a guest who'd barely made the cutoff. I didn't answer. In my bedroom, I turned the lock and opened the closet. The cardboard box was still on the top shelf where I'd left it 15 years ago, labeled in my handwriting, House Docs, 2010. I'd meant to move it to the fire safe a dozen times, but some boxes prefer altitude. My hands were steady as I set it on the bed and lifted the lid. Papers spilled across the comforter like evidence at a hearing. The matte cream of a cashier's check for $340,000 with my signature at the bottom. Closing documents dated March 2010. Buyer, Calvin Hart. Title holder, Derek Hart. Deed transfer. On top of the stack, folded to the size of a playing card, my yellow pad note, for Derek's future, so he starts ahead of where I did. I'd spent a career as a structural engineer, measuring stress points and load limits, learning how much weight a foundation could carry before it cracked. Bridges, parking decks, schools, things people trusted without thinking because someone like me had done the thinking for them. I wanted my son building on solid ground. When he was little and we passed construction sites, he'd press his palms to the rear window and ask why cranes looked like giraffes made of Meccano. I told him because tall things need to be strong and light at the same time. He liked that. So did I. Instead, I had built a weapon and handed it to him, the kind that doesn't look like a weapon until the person holding it turns. The mortgage, they said, was crushing them. It didn't exist. I'd paid cash. The bills they needed help with belonged to a house that had cost them nothing to acquire. And now they wanted half my pension to let me sleep in a bedroom I bought outright, in a home I'd placed in Derek's name, because I believed that's what good fathers do. Downstairs, laughter threaded through the floor vents. The sound had a new chemical mixed into it, relief with a citric bite. Something was funny. I stacked the documents in order. The check, the purchase agreement, the closing statement, the title transfer, each page a load-bearing wall in the structure of their mistake. Engineers learn this early. You don't need to knock down every wall to drop a building. You find the three that matter, and you take your time. I didn't put the box back in the closet. I set it on my desk, within reach. The desk itself had a secret, an interior drawer that locked with a key disguised as a cabinet hinge. I slid the key between my fingers and reminded myself, secrets aren't for hoarding, they're for timing. My pension letter lay in the nightstand, $2,400 monthly, starting April 1st, 3 weeks away. I placed that letter on top of the house papers and sat in the dark to learn what the room felt like now. The bed sighed. The baseboard heater clicked once and went quiet. I could hear a squirrel run the fence line outside like it did every evening at dusk, its toenails soft on cedar. They hadn't asked me to leave. They'd done something worse. They'd put a price on generosity. They'd decided to bill me for love. You don't evict a man in one day when you can invoice him forever. The next morning, a printout waited beside my mug. House rules and expectations in a friendly sans serif. Quiet hours, 10 p.m., 7 a.m. Kitchen access. Lena has morning priority. I may use it after 8:30. Shared spaces. The living room TV is assigned to them. I should enjoy media in my room. Laundry. Sign-up sheet taped to the washer. A small lattice of control. White paper pretending to be neutral. Structure makes life simpler, Lena said from the doorway in her medical billing scrubs, a travel mug already sweating in her hand. She didn't step in far enough to leave. Footprints on the mat. Clear is good, I told her. I folded the paper once and slid it into my shirt pocket. There's a difference between being given rules and taking notes. After they left for work, I walked to the drugstore for a small spiral notebook and wrote the date across the first page like an opening argument. Kitchen access restricted. Shared spaces redefined. Tone. Professional. Then I tucked the notebook into my shirt pocket where it made a square against my chest. Tuesday afternoon, I found Lena photographing the refrigerator shelves, moving cartons to aim around glare. Documentation, she said without shame when she noticed me. We want a baseline for April. Should I expect an itemized receipt? Maybe, she said, already composing the next shot. We'll see how April goes. I wrote that down too. Documentation purposes. Baseline for April, maybe. Quotes sharpen memory. That same afternoon, I walked to a different bank than the one with the candy jar and the tellers who knew my birthday. I opened new checking and savings accounts and moved $87,000 from the old account Derek knew about. Just enough to keep that story alive, leaving the rest where only I could see it. Then I rented a safety deposit box, polished steel. I photographed every house document on my phone, the check, the closing packet, the title transfer, my yellow pad note. I uploaded the images to cloud storage, then locked the originals behind. Steel. Copies went back in the bedroom box, their edges slightly rounder from handling, so they looked convincingly old. If anyone snooped, they'd find paper. What they wouldn't find was leverage. On Wednesday night, I returned from washing dishes to find my room colder than the hallway. The programmable thermostat in the corridor had been set to 58 degrees for my zone. When I nudged it to 68, Derek appeared like a smoke alarm. "Dad, the heat stays there. We can't afford to warm empty rooms." "My room isn't empty. You know what I mean. During business hours, use a blanket." "Business hours," I repeated, and watched his face to see if he heard himself. He didn't. I wrote, "Thermostat at 58. Use a blanket," attributed to Derek Hart. Thursday's dinner was roasted sweet potatoes with paprika, a salad with too much vinegar, and a topic they'd been waiting to introduce. "Derek and I wondered if first-floor living might be better for you," Lena said cheerfully, her fork pointing at the air like a flight attendant showing an exit. "Safer, fewer stairs." "I'm 67, not 97. Just something to consider. Your room would make a great home office for Derek. Tax deductible. We saw a video." "A lot to think about," I said, and stood to clear my plate. That night I searched Oregon law with a pencil behind my ear and a cup of coffee beside the trackpad. I began with clumsy phrases, bought house in child's name, and ended with the precise term I needed lighting up multiple pages like runway bulbs: constructive trust. Courts could recognize true ownership, despite the name on the deed, when one party supplied the purchase funds, and the title went to another, under a specific understanding. I copied statutes, case summaries, law firm blogs, and the names of 24 attorneys who handled title trust disputes in Portland. It was not a short list. That comforted me. You want your problem to be the kind other people have already had. Friday morning, I reread everything. The law was straightforward as far as law goes. Proof you paid, proof of intent, proof you treated the property like the owner. Taxes, repairs, renovations. I had a cashier's check and the closing packet. I had receipts for a roof, $12,000, an HVAC system, $8,500, and a kitchen I'd renovated with a contractor who still waved when he drove by. I had 15 years of property taxes with my name where the county liked it. Saturday they called a meeting at the dining table. The language of tenants had crept into the house, the way ivy creeps into mortar. A new spreadsheet appeared, for $200 for base rent and food, plus a la carte life, laundry access, garage, yard usage. Derek scrolled his phone while Lena read numbers with the sweet detachment of a receptionist checking boxes. "I'll review this," I said. "You'll have an answer soon." "Soon means?" Lena asked. "Soon means soon," I said. She didn't like the elasticity of that. Sunday night, I sat at my desk with papers arranged by category and a list of attorney names in a column. One site stood out: Graham Mercer, real estate litigator, 20 years in property disputes. His bio mentioned civil engineering before law school. He'd understand load paths and how one wrong calculation can drop a building. We booked a 2 p.m. consult for Monday. "Going out," I told Derek the next morning as he put on his shoes. He barely looked up. "Sure, Dad. I took the bus. I like buses. They make your errands look like everyone else's, and anonymity is a good solvent for daylight." The elevator to Mercer and Ashcroft thudded to the 12th floor like a heartbeat, and when the doors opened, the carpet smelled like lemon and money. The receptionist smiled the way trained people smile before they see whether you're going to be trouble. Graham Mercer shook my hand firmly, silver at the temples. Reading glasses on a cord, a mind that moved like a level settling to center. "Tell me what happened," he said. I laid it all out. The check for $340,000, the March 2010 closing. Title in Derek's name only, my receipts for roof, HVAC, kitchen, taxes, 15 years of bearing every cost. Then I slid over the new printouts. Rent, house rules, kitchen access, and the pension letter with the figure they had tailored their appetite to. He read silently, pencil tapping a legal pad. When he looked up, his eyes were steady. "What are my odds?" I asked. 60-40 in your favor, he said. "Maybe 65 with this documentation. Oregon courts impose constructive trusts when funds and intent are clear. It'll take patience and money. $8,000 retainer. Likely 15 to 20 overall. When can you file?" "This week," he said. "We'll verify title and record history with the county, then file the petition. Service within 48 hours of filing." I wrote the check from my new account. He noticed. Good lawyers notice everything. "New account?" he asked. Seemed prudent. "Smart," he said, sliding a copy of the retainer back to me. "Once we file, expect noise. Desperate people make noisy mistakes. Keep your notes clean." I got home before they did, tucked the receipt in my locked desk, and took my chair at dinner as if chairs were neutral. "We reviewed market rates," Lena announced, producing yet another spreadsheet, smooth as an ice rink. "Your rent increases to $2,500 starting May 1st. "That's 25% up," I said. "That's the market. You're still getting a deal," she said. Derek added, "Bills keep going up, Dad. We're not making money off you." I picked up my plate. "Understood. May 1st. Upstairs through the vent I heard her, "See, he's reasonable. By next year we can push it to 2,000, I wrote. April 6, attorney retained. Petition files next week. Rent revised to $1,500. Strategy noted, incremental demands. Long-term exploitation planned." Graham said, "I'd need corroboration." I knew exactly where to go. Our neighbor across the hedge, Marjorie Patel, had moved in 2 months before me. Same builder, flipped floor plan. For 15 years she'd watched me cut checks, hire crews, and fix the things I could. Her house smelled like cardamom and clean counters when she opened the door. "Marjorie," I said, "do you remember me buying my place?" "Of course," she answered without hesitation. "Cash. You were proud, Calvin. Everyone on this street knows it's your house. Would you be willing to write that down, date and sign?" She took the pen like a witness accepting an oath. 20 minutes later I had a statement. Details, dates, her signature neat and decisive. "I'll testify," she said. "What they're doing is wrong." I photographed the statement and filed. The original in my folder behind a tab, marked Neighbors. Next, I hired an appraiser, Ethan Morales, 30 years in the job. He measured, photographed, and sent me the report 3 days later. Current value, $520,000. The photos looked like my house had signed with an agency to appear in a glossy magazine about tasteful people who never lost their temper. I forwarded the PDF to Graham. Then I opened the county records portal and typed my address. History loaded. March 2010. Purchase price $340,000. No mortgage recorded. Then an entry 14 months ago. Home equity line of credit. $80,000 from Pacific. Cascade Bank. My chest hollowed. Derek had borrowed against the equity I created. Without a word. I clicked deeper and found a notice of default dated 6 weeks ago. 3 payments missed. Monthly payment $2,400. Total arrears $7,200. Foreclosure in 90 days, if uncured. There, math made sudden sense. $2,400 matched my pension exactly. The $1,200 rent was half the whole. The $2,500 revision was panic disguised as policy. When people can't breathe, they start charging for oxygen. I emailed Graham, subject line, additional evidence, urgent. I attached the appraisal, the HELOC screenshot, and the default notice. This explains the rent timeline, I wrote. Please call when convenient. That evening, Derek stopped me in the hall. Dad, did someone come by today? A neighbor saw a car. Appraiser, I said, for my records. Appraiser, why? Personal business. I closed my door and hit send. Graham called before 8 the next morning. Calvin, the package you sent is dynamite. Marjorie's statement, the appraisal, and the default notice are leverage we didn't expect. I'm filing today. They'll be served within 48 hours. Then what? 30 days to respond. They'll hire a bargain attorney, file an answer, maybe counterclaim, keep documenting, and be careful. Financially cornered people do stupid, illegal things. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. A minute passed. Then heavy steps up the stairs. Derek appeared in my doorway, face bloodless, papers shaking in his hand. Lena hovered behind him, white around the mouth like she'd rinsed with milk. You sued us? She said. I filed for a constructive trust, I said, turning a page in my book. Yes. You can't do this, Derek snapped. The house is in my name. Then you have nothing to worry about. They retreated. I could hear them smoothing the papers downstairs, their voices moving from confusion to anger, to fear. Paper changes pitch as hands sweat. I heard that too. That night, they tried for a kitchen ambush. Can't we handle this like family? Derek asked. The word family wobbled like a chair with one leg shorter. No, I said, stirring the pot. But our attorneys can. You're suing your own son, Lena said, voice sharpened to a clean edge. I'm reclaiming property I purchased, I answered. You redefined family when you invoiced me for a bedroom I bought. Then get out, Derek said, stepping close. Leave tonight. That would be an illegal eviction, I said. Oregon requires written notice. Try it, and tomorrow I file an additional claim. Lena tugged his sleeve. Let's go, she told him, glaring at me like I'd scratched her car. This isn't over. No, I said. It's just beginning. 3 days later, during my annual checkup, they changed every lock in the house. My key spun and stuck like a bad coin. New brass hardware on the back door, too. A glowing doorbell. Camera I had never seen. When Derek arrived, I stepped in behind him. He blocked the threshold with his shoulder. You don't live here anymore, he said. Leave or I'm calling the police. I held up my phone, recording. For the record, you've changed locks and barred me from my residence and belongings. That's an illegal lockout. Then sue me, he said. Oh, wait, already did. The deadbolt clicked with the tidy finality of a seatbelt in a car you didn't ask to ride in. I sat in my car and called Graham. They did what? He said. While you were at a medical appointment. We're filing emergency motions in the morning. Tonight, find a motel and keep every receipt. Judges hate this, they'll pay for it. I drove west until a neon vacancy sign flickered like a rescue buoy. The Sunset Motor Inn, room 14. 2 lamps with yellow shades, a thin comforter, a television bolted to the dresser. For 29 minutes, I let the humiliation hit. The room smelled like old carpet and citrus cleaner. The drapes were heavy enough to be therapy. Then I made a list. Clothes, toiletries, burner laptop, all receipts in a folder. Document everything. It's amazing how much control returns when you put a title on a piece of paper. The next morning, Graham filed 2 motions. An emergency hearing on the illegal lockout and an order requiring immediate access to recover my property. The clerk set a Monday court date. By Wednesday, a process server found me at the motel. How Derek had my location, I couldn't say. Inside the packet, their counterclaim, $45,000 for 15 years unpaid rent, and a notarized affidavit from Lena's brother in Salem, swearing he'd witnessed Derek paying everything for years, fiction packaged in legal formatting. The affidavit font had that smug serif that tries to make lies look civilized. Graham didn't flinch. We'll depose him. He'll fold under dates and details. It's noise. Keep collecting facts. 5 days after the lockout, I stood in a courtroom under the Oregon state seal while a judge with a tight bun and iron eyes listened to our exhibits. Time-stamped photos of new locks, a recording of Derek's threat, a motel bill totaling $469. When the audio played and Derek's "then sue me" filled the courtroom, he looked down like the floor had suddenly become interesting. "Family or not," the judge said to their discount attorney, "residential lockouts without proper notice are illegal." She ordered them to give me supervised access within 24 hours and to cover my temporary housing until the main case resolved. Lena blinked twice fast, which I'd learned was her tell when a plan met a locked door. Then the judge turned to constructive trust. Graham put the enlarged copy of my cashier's check on the document camera. $340,000. March 2010. Columbia title. My signature. He walked the judge through 15 years of receipts. Roof, HVAC, kitchen, taxes, maintenance, every payment from my accounts. Their attorney muttered it was a gift and offered a cousin's affidavit. Graham pointed out there was no gift deed, and also, you don't charge rent to someone you believe received a gift. The judge raised an eyebrow, which is the judicial version of throwing a flag. She ordered a forensic accountant to trace the money trail. 4 weeks, full records, then a second hearing. Outside, Derek and Lena argued with their lawyer on the steps, gestures wild and faces drawn. I didn't need to hear words. Body language reads fine on mute. Blame has a choreography. I checked back into room 14, stacked my receipts like a small fort, and waited. 10 days later, a new listing appeared online. My home at 2851 Alder Lane, priced at $480,000. Below appraised value, motivated seller. The photos were the same as Ethan's appraisal shots, only staged with a bowl of lemons, like a magazine whispering, "Buy me." Graham called as the link loaded. "He can do that?" I asked. "Technically, yes, he has legal title, but we can stop it." We filed an emergency injunction before the clerk's window closed and appeared in front of the same judge at 10 a.m. the next morning. The agent subpoenaed admitted Derek hadn't disclosed the lawsuit. Sale enjoined, the judge ruled from the bench. Order to be recorded immediately. By afternoon, the listing was gone, and a cloud on title was recorded with the county. The agent looked like someone who had accidentally grabbed the wrong suitcase from the airport carousel and now had to explain the underwear inside. A week later, Pacific Cascade Bank filed the foreclosure formally. 5 months behind, $12,000. In arrears, 90 days until the gavel fell. Derek's BMW vanished. Lena's jewelry appeared on Facebook Marketplace under a polite caption. Lovely pieces, downsizing. Grocery bags changed logos, brand names to generic. They couldn't sell, couldn't pay, couldn't breathe. The forensic report arrived on a Tuesday. Graham slid the binder across his conference table. It had tabs like a well-kept hive. Page 3, he said. Conclusion. All plaintiff documents authentic. No evidence of defendant funding the purchase or maintenance. My cashier's check verified through Federal Reserve records. Signatures confirmed. Receipts cross-matched with contractor ledgers and bank statements. Then the kicker, Lena's brothers. Affidavit contradicted by his own credit card and employer records. He was in Salem working during the dates he witnessed payments in Portland. You could almost hear the affidavit deflate. 3 days later, the expert testified under oath that I funded 100% of the purchase and upkeep. The judge recessed, read the report, then returned with a preliminary ruling. Constructive trust established. Derek held legal title, but I was the equitable owner. She awarded me $12,000 for the illegal lockout and set a final hearing to formalize remedies. Lena hissed in the hallway about appeals. Their attorney shook his head and said, "Settlement like a doctor saying antibiotics." Back at the motel, I sat with my copy of the report, and one word glowed from page 12 like a small, perfect bulb. Unquestionably. 4 months after a Sunday lunch, I could see home from here. The final hearing moved fast. Legal language etched into the record like a line cut in steel. Property at 2851 Alder Lane, the judge read, is held in constructive trust for plaintiff Calvin Hart. She outlined remedies as if threading a needle. Derek must execute a quitclaim deed, transferring title to me within 10 days, or pay $420,000 covering purchase funds, maintenance, damages, and legal fees. Either path ended with the same door. Closing in the same frame, Derek stared at the tabletop as if willing wood grain to become a portal. Lena whispered hard into their attorney's shoulder. He didn't blink. There was nowhere left to go except the part where you do what the paper tells you. In a side room, Graham laid out clean math for a settlement. I would take title and satisfy the $80,000 HELOC to halt foreclosure. They would vacate within 30 days. No further claims. Their lawyer explained the alternative with the quiet mercy of someone who dislikes raising his voice. Foreclosure in 6 days, wrecked credit for 7 years, possible deficiency judgments if the sale didn't cover the debt. Even pride can. Read a calendar when the font is big enough. Derek's voice was hollow. We accept. Within hours, a title clerk started the paperwork. The injunction, the expert report, and the preliminary ruling made the line straight. Lien paid. Cloud. Removed, quitclaim recorded. My name slid into the right blank at the county recorder's office, like a key finally turned the right way after years of scraping. I made coffee in the motel room on a portable kettle and looked at the receipt pile. Each paper a mile marker of what they chose to do and what I chose to document. Then I packed my laptop and the brown banker's box of originals and drove back to Alder Lane with a court order in my jacket pocket that felt heavier than paper ought to feel. The first trip back wasn't ceremonial. It was supervised access, exactly as the judge had ordered. A neutral third party, a polite man with a clipboard, stood by while I retrieved clothes, tools, and the photo albums Lena had tried to pretend didn't exist by moving them to a box. Marked Garage, Misky. I labeled every tote with painter's tape and a Sharpie and logged it in my notebook. Box 1, winter clothes. Box 2, documents. Box 3, photos. 1993-2001. When you've been locked out of your life, chain of custody becomes a habit. I kept my eyes on the work and off the faces. Over the next week, Derek and Lena's move-out took shape. Amida's Evans sedan replaced the gleaming BMW, the front room filled with cardboard convocations, labeled in a hurry. Kitchen, bedroom, office. Lena listed furniture online with captions that sounded like she was writing to a friend she hoped would still like her after the money changed hands. Derek folded shirts at the dining table where he once slid me house rules with a straight face. They were civil with me, which is different from kind. I was fine with civil. Kind had left the building months ago and taken the soft towels with it. 30 days, the judge had said. They finished in 27. The last 3 days were a hum of tape and the whisper of resignation. On the last morning, a moving truck idled at the curb. I sat on the porch with a mug. The coffee smelled like a decision. Derek set down a box, wiped his forehead with his sleeve, and walked over. The engine from the truck coughed twice, then settled into a dependable grumble. "Dad," he began, then stopped, as if the gear he needed wasn't where he left it. He tried again. "Calvin, I'm sorry it came to this." I kept my voice even. "You demanded half my pension for the privilege of sleeping in a bedroom I paid for. You changed the locks, then tried to sell what wasn't yours. You made choices, now you get the bill." He nodded. The nod of someone hearing the math finally click, the way a child hears that 7 is always 4 plus 3 and cannot be anything, else no matter how he argues. They drove away at noon with a vacuum cleaner box wedged against the back window and a plant tipping onto the seat. I watched until their turn signal blinked out of sight and the truck's beeping, beeping, beeping faded into ordinary neighborhood noise. A dog insisting on the mail, a bicycle chain whispering, somebody practicing scales on a trumpet with the window cracked, and then I stood, went inside and shut my door. My door. I walked the house like you walk the perimeter after a storm, slow, attentive, listening for hidden damage. The living room, where they had itemized my monthly oxygen. The kitchen where Lena had photographed yogurt as if a crime had been committed against dairy. The stairs they wanted me to stop climbing for my safety. The thermostat where Derek had tapped 58 degrees and told me to use a blanket. Ownership has a sound. It's different from possession. Harder, quieter. It doesn't need to be loud. I called Marjorie to tell her I was back. She answered on the second ring as if she'd been sitting with the phone in her hand watching my driveway. "Good," she said. "It's where it belongs." I called Graham next. "Thank you," I said. "You did the heavy lift," he replied. "You kept records. You kept your calm. Judges like calm. Jurors like calm. Roofers like calm. It keeps things square." I set up a small card table by the window and spread out folders. Court orders, the quitclaim, the lien satisfaction. I slipped the motel receipts into a manila envelope marked "Damages, Paid." Then I took a breath and did a different kind of math. Some debts once paid do not exist anymore. Some lessons once learned keep the roof on. 3 days later, I drove to Pacific Cascade Bank and handed a teller a $80,000 cashier's check. She stamped it with a heavy, satisfying thunk. The wood-paneled conference room, where we signed the lien release, had a painting of Mimt Hood over a gas fireplace. The banker slid agreements gently across the table, and for 20 minutes nobody said the word foreclosure. When I walked out, my house was free again. The air tasted like the first window you open in spring. I drove home the slow way. Alder. Lane looked the same. Dog walkers, a kid on a scooter whose helmet had stickers like constellations, a mail carrier with the rhythm of a metronome. The quiet felt earned, the kind that stays. You want a pretty ending to a story like this. Cinematic, the prodigal son on the porch steps, a speech about forgiveness. But this isn't a parable, it's a ledger. You balance what came in and what went out. The difference isn't poetry, it's equity. Still, there are human corners. In the second week of September, a card arrived from an unfamiliar address. Inside, a single sentence in Derek's messy print. "I'm sorry I let money. Talk louder than you. No return phone number, no ask." I set the card on the mantel beside a photo of him at 6 with a missing front tooth, holding a paper telescope, pointing at dragons on a map. Somewhere between the dragons and the spreadsheets we lost a bridge. Bridges matter to engineers. We notice when they're gone. I didn't call. I didn't throw it away either. Quiet routines returned like birds that know where to land. I replaced a cracked outlet cover in the living room with one that clicked flush. I crawled under the kitchen sink with a wrench and replumbed a slow drain that had gathered a chorus of gurgles. I oiled the front door hinges until the click turned soft. I hired a roofer to replace 2 blistered shingles because maintenance is a love letter you write to the future while you're still strong enough to hold the pen. Then I started a folder labeled Estate, Instructions, and placed it beside my will. The first page read, "If you love someone, do not hide ownership inside. Generosity, gifts should be clean. Paper should tell the truth." I walked the property line with a cup of coffee one morning when the hedge wore a mist like a shawl. The cedar boards were damp and smelled like rain, even though it hadn't rained. Sometimes the air remembers for you. I trimmed back a branch and waved to Marjorie when she came out to get her mail. She lifted her hand in a salute, the way neighbors do when they've seen the same seasons together. Her tulips leaned toward the path like ears. Inside, I set the mug down and opened the spiral notebook I'd been keeping since the Sunday rent meeting. The last entry was dated the day after the final hearing. Court affirms constructive. Trust. Lockout damages paid. Title restored. HELOC satisfied. Keys, my ring only. I drew a box around the list and shaded it in until the paper went shiny under the pencil. Engineers like closure, you can see. People ask what justice feels like. They picture trumpets. But justice, with its proper name, on the deed and its quiet thermostat at 68 degrees, feels like releveling a door so it closes without force. You shave the hinge, you tighten the screw, you make the thing square. When it swings on its own and stays shut with a gentle click, you don't cheer, you breathe. There were loose ends, of course. There always are. The county bill for recording the injunction and the quitclaim arrived with the tidy cruelty of small amounts that matter because of what they represent. Graham's final statement came by email, with line items that read like chapter headings: complaint filed, service of process, emergency injunction, forensic review, hearing prep, final hearing. I paid it the same day. Paid in full has a sweet, pragmatic sound. Marjorie and I had coffee on my back steps the following Saturday. She brought lemon bars that tasted like the memory of a fair day. We didn't talk about trials or affidavits, just birds, and the new couple who'd rented the blue bungalow 2 streets over, and the way the morning glowed at the edges. She studied my face the way friends do when they're checking for structural cracks. You look lighter, she said. I feel square, I said. That'll do. She laughed. Only an engineer would say that. I called the locksmith the next week and asked him to rekey the entire house. He arrived with a small case that folded open like a doctor's bag and set to work. The metallic clicks sounded like a song I used to know. When he finished, he pushed a set of keys across the counter and said, "These are yours." He said it with emphasis that made it a ceremony. In October, I turned 68. I bought myself a cake with a ridiculous amount of frosting and ate 2 pieces with coffee while standing at the sink because I could. I booked a train trip to the coast and watched the Columbia widen into the kind of water that reminds you how big the world is, even when you've been living inside a single problem. I sat on a wet log, listened to the ocean breathe, and thought, but all the invisible engineering under my feet, piers, rebar, tension, compression, things holding other things up because they were designed to. My favorite kind of miracle is the kind that has math hiding inside it. A month later, a letter arrived from Pacific Cascade Bank confirming the HELOC was satisfied and the lien released. The paper was glossy, the font friendly, the signature scribbled by someone whose job was to say, "We are done here," as politely as possible. I slid it into the damages, paid envelope, and felt the house exhale again. I also called a counselor, a practical, no-nonsense woman named Cheryl. Because even when the paperwork is right, a man might need help filing away the parts that don't fit in folders. We met for 6 sessions. She asked useful questions. What did you want to be true that wasn't? That generosity would be contagious, I said. And what was true? That generosity is not a vaccine. She nodded. Then she asked the question that built the new bridge I'm still walking on. What boundary would have protected both love and the house? Paper, I said. Signed and recorded paper. She smiled. Sometimes love needs a clerk. Winter crept up the trees. Cold weather moves through a house like a critic. It notices the gaps. I added insulation in the attic, new weather stripping under the back door, and a proper sweep on the garage entry that made the door thump shut with a satisfying seal. Small work. Good work. The kind that keeps heat where heat belongs. One Sunday, Lena's car slowed in front of the house and then kept going. Maybe she was looking for parking. Maybe muscle memory dragged the wheel. Maybe she wanted to see if the lemons were still on the counter. I don't know. I stood behind the curtain and didn't move the fabric. The car didn't stop. In December, my old crew from the engineering office invited me to a retirement lunch they claimed was late on purpose so you'd have something to look forward to. We ate at a place with tall windows and napkins that felt like they had a degree. They gave me a framed photo of the team in hard hats on the day we opened the Eastern Pedestrian Bridge, a project that had taken 2 summers and the patience of saints. Someone had written in the margin, "To Calvin, who taught us that straight isn't the same as level, and level isn't the same as true." I hung it in the hallway where the light in late afternoon makes the frame glow. In January, I heard, "From Graham one last time, opposing counsel confirms no appeal." His message ended with 2 words, "Good closure." Lawyers don't waste syllables when the numbers already said what mattered. I planted blueberries in spring, 2 varieties so they'd cross-pollinate and keep each other honest. The bush closest to the back steps produced early, small berries, with tart skins and sweet centers that burst when you didn't expect them to. I ate a handful standing barefoot on the porch and realized I hadn't thought about the motel in a week. Progress can be measured in fruit. Summer came back with ornate evenings. I sat in the yard with a book and listened to sprinklers clicking, like distant knitting needles. Sometimes neighbors' laughter rose and fell. Sometimes a basketball found a rim with a friendly thump. The house learned my rhythms again. The bed remembered the shape of a body that sleeps without waiting for a footstep outside the door. The kitchen remembered how I like onions. The patience of low heat and salt. There are stories I tell myself about Derek as a boy, the ones with paper telescopes and dragons. They're still true, but they're not the only true things. Adults are mosaics. You don't get to choose which tiles shine. If he ever chooses better tiles, there's a porch here that knows how to hold weight. I took the house docs, 2010, box to the fire, safe at last. It felt theatrical to open the lid, touch the edges of the documents, and then place them into a metal drawer with a combination that only I know. Not because I planned to hide anything, but because I wanted the symbolism to be loud enough for even my stubborn parts to hear. We put important things where they can be found by people who need to find them. On the first truly hot day of July, I set the thermostat to 68 degrees and made a glass of iced tea, so cold the sides fogged up instantly. I stood in the cool, competent quiet of my house and listened to the air move like a tide that understood its shoreline. I thought about doors and hinges and the math of regret and the law that let truth take its time and still win. I also thought about how for a while I had slept in a motel room where the artwork was a print of a lighthouse that looked like it had given up warning ships and started hoping they knew better. I kept the receipt for that room not because I needed reimbursement, the court had already ordered it, but because sometimes it's good to keep one relic of the place you don't intend to return to. A reminder, a mile marker, a nobody is ever going to change your locks again. Talisman. At twilight, I walked out to the porch and sat in the chair with the good back support. The crickets tuned up. A neighbor somewhere grilled something that smelled like a memory I couldn't place. The sky did that trick where it kept glowing after the sun had left, generous even in departure. I held the cold glass with both hands and felt the condensation wet my fingers. If you asked me then what justice felt like, I would have told you the truth I know now. It's not applause, it's permission. It's the click of a door you repaired yourself, closing just right and staying closed because the hinge is square and the strike plate is true. It's a cup on the rack with the open end down, so the next time you reach for it, it's yours to fill. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're listening, at night, set your thermostat the way you like it. No one else gets a vote.